Backwoods, Kentucky, 1809. A small group of people have gathered around a log cabin. Inside is a woman in hard labor. In about 20 minutes, she'll give birth to a baby boy and change the course of world history. Outside, a thunderstorm rages, foreshadowing the many battles that this child will face. Name will be Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born into poverty. As a child, his family moved several times. When he was 7 years old, his father died and he had to work the farm while his mother and sister were living off the land. In short, it was a financial struggle. Abraham worked hard. By age 16, he was tall and lanky with a mop of unkempt hair. An intelligent kid, he developed a habit of reading everything he could get his hands on. Unfortunately, he received less than a year of formal schooling, so he spent most of his youth teaching himself how to read. That meant reading by candlelight late into the night after a long day of working the farm. It was a lot of work, but Abe was determined to better himself. During his early 20s, he began working as a storekeeper before moving to New Salem, Illinois, to work at a general store. And there, to everyone's surprise, he met some success. Soon he became the postmaster, but his new job came with a side quest. You see, the local post office was also the nearest bank. One day, thieves robbed it, and now it was up to Abe to repay the customers. Now, this wasn't exactly easy because Abe had no money, so he spent the next 6 years paying them back $6 a month, until he finally paid off the last debt. Throughout all of this, Abe never lost hope. He felt a strong sense of duty, and that helped motivate him to make something of himself. So he left his job at the post office and set his eyes on becoming a lawyer. With little money and no connections, his options were limited, so he decided to teach himself the law. He studied law books for hours on end and learned the craft. Eventually, he was ready to take the bar exam, but he was in debt and couldn't afford the registration fee, so he did odd jobs like chopping wood to earn money. Finally, he scraped together enough cash and took the test, passing it on the first try. He officially became a lawyer in 1836, but he struggled to find clients. Despite his best efforts, he just couldn't catch a break. Seemed like fate was against him. She was beautiful and well off, which made her a perfect match for Abe. Well, except for one thing. Her mother disapproved of Abe and wanted her to marry someone else. Undeterred, Abe continued seeing Mary in secret. Then in 1836, he finally saved up enough money to propose. To his surprise, Mary said yes. Her mother was furious, but she couldn't say no to her daughter, so she let the wedding go forward. For a while, they were happy. But soon, Mary began feeling suffocated by her mother-in-law, Nancy Hanks, who was staying with them. To escape, Mary, Abe, and Robert moved to a different house. 2 more sons would follow, but tragedy struck. First, Abe and Mary's first son, Robert Todd Lincoln, died at age 3. Then 4 years later, his mother Nancy Hanks died. All the while, Abe's career was taking off. He joined the Whig Party and served in the Illinois state legislature. He became a strong critic of slavery and an advocate for Illinois' growing railroad industry. Still, he never forgot about the people struggling in his home state. He pushed legislation to improve schools and infrastructure. Meanwhile, his sons grew older and developed strong personalities. Robert was quiet and thoughtful. Edward was outgoing and energetic. Sadly, their happiness wouldn't last. In 1850, Edward died of tuberculosis. This hit Abe especially hard. He loved his son very much and even blamed himself for his death. He'd been working too much and didn't spend as much time with his family as he should have. So when his third son was born, he vowed to be a better father. He named the boy William Wallace Lincoln. But as the years passed, his marriage began to fall apart. He and Mary grew increasingly distant. Soon rumors swirled that she was having an affair. But whether or not that was true, Abe filed for divorce. Before the trial, Mary packed her things and left town, returning only to vote against her husband. While his personal life crumbled, Abe began campaigning for U.S. Senate. His opponents spread vicious rumors about him, saying that he was a liar, a drunkard, and that he once stole a horse. They also criticized his views on slavery, but these tactics only motivated him further. He won the primary election, then faced his Republican opponent in the general election. Abe knew that he couldn't win unless he appealed to voters on an emotional level, So he gave a famous speech known as the House Divided speech. In it, he explained that slavery was wrong and that he believed all men were created equal. He told his audience that if they didn't abolish slavery, then the country would eventually split in two. Most people agreed. He won the election and became the first Republican to represent Illinois in the U.S. Senate. Meanwhile, the rest of his family followed him to Washington, D.C., but he still hadn't resolved his issues with his wife. After spending a few weeks alone, he visited Mary in her home to reconcile. At first, it seemed to be going well. They talked and laughed like old friends. But then Mary started talking about her dream house. Abe got angry and called her selfish. She stormed out, accidentally knocking him over. Abe fell to the floor and cracked his head open. Mary screamed for help and rushed him to the hospital. When he woke up, he learned that he suffered a concussion and needed to rest. He returned to his old home to recover. Not long after, Mary came to visit him. They argued again. And this time, she called Abe a low-class hatter. That was the last straw. He told her that he was done and stormed out of the house. He would never see Mary again. Back in Washington, Abe continued fighting against slavery. But in 1860, the South Carolina legislature threatened to leave the Union. Soon other states followed. In total, 11 states left. They met up in a convention and formed the Confederate States of America. Before long, the Civil War broke out. Abe Lincoln, who campaigned on a platform of keeping the country together, was now in charge of doing just that. Of course, he was nervous, but his fear was overshadowed by his sense of duty. He knew that he had to do what was right for the country. As president, he appointed people based on their qualifications, not their political party or social status. He also made sure that women were represented in his cabinet. But perhaps Lincoln's greatest accomplishment was issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery had been a major issue throughout the war. Many people thought that the purpose of the war was to preserve the Union. But Lincoln knew that it was also an opportunity to end slavery. On January 1, 1863, he announced that all slaves in the rebellious states would be free. This did not apply to border states that allowed slavery or to areas that were already under Union control. However, it did apply to the vast majority of enslaved people in the South. Of course, this enraged Southerners who saw slavery as a way of life, but Lincoln didn't care. He knew that he was doing the right thing. Fortunately, the war would drag on for another 3 years. Tens of thousands of soldiers would die on both sides. But eventually the Union won, and slavery was abolished. As the war wound down, Lincoln set his sights on the future. But before he could finish his term, tragedy struck. On April 14, 1865, Lincoln attended a play with his wife and some friends. During the second act, a man died the following morning. The country mourned the loss of its president, but also the loss of a friend. In his short time in office, Lincoln had accomplished more than any other president. He led the country through its greatest crisis, and he did it with grace, dignity, and compassion. He was truly one of a kind. This has been Lincoln in 100 Seconds. If you want to see more videos like this one, be sure to stay tuned. Also, check out my podcast available on various platforms. Thanks for watching.